Greetings from the center of Canada and welcome to the Fringe Faithful Collective. My name is Mike Powell and this is article episode number 6, entitled Coincidence, and the unsatisfactory answers held by those who think such events are no more than mathematically probable or no less than divinely orchestrated. In article episode 4, I made reference to a musician from Toronto named Hayden, who I've been faithfully listening to since the release of his first album in 1995. I'm very fortunate to have seen him in concert on 5 occasions, but the most memorable event for me is undoubtedly a strange coincidence that occurred while my wife Heather and I were living in Cambridge. Heather was working at a bookstore, and one day while she was talking with a coworker, somehow the fact that Hayden was my favorite singer-songwriter became part of the conversation, as well as Heather's non-enjoyment of his music. And it was then that Hayden's now wife, Christy, revealed she was in fact Hayden's girlfriend. What were the chances of something like that happening? One might even surmise that it was somehow fate or meant to be. But for what purpose? I did get a signed CD out of this significantly random occurrence, which was awesome. Still, situations like this make us wonder, is there more going on than what we can see on life's surface? Another more recent example of coincidence relates to a podcast I started listening to last year and the experience of moving out of province. The day we found out that we were relocating to Manitoba, I was doing the dishes and decided to arbitrarily pick an episode of Nomad podcast that I hadn't heard yet. Of the 149 episodes that I had to choose from at the time, I selected one featuring a guest who I didn't recognize and started listening. The interview was with someone named Jamie Arpin-Reese, an author-speaker who just happened to live in Winnipeg, of all places. Fast forward a few months, and one Sunday morning in September, I decided to check out a church in the neighboring city of Steinbach. It was the very first congregation I visited since leaving Ontario, and to my surprise, the guest speaker that morning was none other than Jamie Arpin-Reese. Again, the circumstances from my perspective were uncanny. However, was this an example of divine ordination, or was this merely a strange instance of likelihood? When it comes to our understanding of and approach to navigating through our day-to-day life, we all rely on certain maxims or principles, short phrases or proverbial sayings that guide our thinking and conduct, memorable words that inform and reinforce our beliefs and their corresponding translation into word and deed. Expressions like, let moderation be your guide, or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. For myself, one of the most central and captivating ideas used to be the widely held outlook that everything happens for a reason. The suggestion that there are no accidents. As a youth, the word coincidence took on new meaning for me, and I came to see it as the opposite of chance, going so far as making the claim that luck didn't exist. After all, in many ways, we each want to believe that the things we experience in this life aren't simply unintentional and that every situation is meaningful. On the surface, the notion that God coordinates all things from above, like a cosmic conductor, is a comforting concept. I can't count the number of times I've happened to run into someone I knew and wondered if the encounter was more than mere happenstance. All of us at one time or another stumble upon those moments and we utter the words, small world. However, is this a manifestation of God's plan or merely a fulfilled mathematical probability? And what of all those difficult times that we've faced in life? If we hold firmly to an everything happens for a reason outlook, which as an aside has no scriptural basis, wouldn't we then have to conclude that God is the author of those times too, including the really, really bad things? We each have our ways of trying to steer around or through the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. In other words, situations where our beliefs are challenged, where there is inconsistency between the convictions we maintain and the new, seemingly contradictory life experiences. As for me, over the years, I've come to realize that we tend to read into things a little too much. Like Paul Vasquez, the guy behind the camera who filmed the viral video Double Rainbow, our existence is full of circumstances that, for us, beg the question, what does this mean? But sometimes a rainbow is just a rainbow. even if it's a double one. Now, this is not to say that life is completely meaningless. God may be willing and able to intervene within history in order to bring lives together in a way that is momentous. Nevertheless, as soon as you start considering coincidences as somehow God-ordained, and comparing these incidents to occurrences like natural disasters or the Holocaust, any notion of a calculated prearrangement or purpose falls away quite quickly. It does make me wonder, though, similar to the words inscribed on the side mirrors of our vehicles, is it at all possible that God is at times closer than God appears? Sure, the mathematical odds of certain encounters are always existent, but when we are witness to things coming together in a way that transcends our expectations, when we are for whatever reason in exactly the right place at the right time, before we straightforwardly dismiss it as nothing more than a fluke, perhaps it would be worth pausing and allowing ourselves to be astonished for a little while. Similar to what I helpfully learned in 2009 when I was in the audience at Rob Bell's Drops Like Stars tour, oftentimes a more helpful question to ask, instead of why this, is what now? In other words, when something unforeseen takes place, it might be helpful to bracket out the extremes of both probability and divine intervention. Because on one hand, though it may be possible to calculate or explain the likelihood of two people ending up in the same place at the same time, the number of variables at work are really quite astounding. And on the other hand, as I retrospectively consider the numerous coincidents I've experienced to date, they have rarely, if ever, manifestly factored into a larger, overarching, God-directed trajectory where those chance moments were key factors in the progression of a larger meta-narrative. All this to say the perspectives of luck on one side and destiny on the other are reductionist attempts to understand why an event may have occurred, and one either ends up dismissing happenstance as utterly meaningless, or one may instead falsely assume a situation carries greater weight than it actually does. As for me, I'm not interested in maintaining a perspective that's basely about numbers or blindly superstitious. What I find remarkable or notable is the overlapping of choices. To this end, I think what's going on is both more and less ambiguous, mysterious, and extraordinary than we'd like to believe. That is to say, given the probability of any particular event, what's enigmatic is the inexplicable fact that it has occurred, especially in situations when the odds are so low. And given everyone's autonomy to make this or that decision, each happening is also arguably beyond mere predetermination. We each go through life choosing between various options of what we'd like to happen next. However, if we theistically or deistically accept that there is a God, we also should consider that God may have a free will that's comparable to our own. Accordingly, is it completely outside the realm of possibility that God might somehow be involved in directing circumstances, even if only slightly or subtly from afar? This isn't to say that everything happens for a reason. It doesn't. Yet I'd like to believe that there's more at work than utter randomness and chaos. Most days I do land on the side of statistics, but I've never liked math. And though I more often than not remain skeptical of God's specific involvement in the world and our lives, what John Locke said to Jack in Season 2 of Lost still resonates with me. Namely,
well, I'm a man of faith. Do you really think all this is an accident?
Peace and love, sisters and brothers.